How much time needs to pass before grave robbing turns into archaeology? In North America, archaeologists have to be extremely careful with any kind of Native American burial. Nowadays it's more and more common that archaeologists might get a chance to look at a burial, but they put it back in place as best as they can when they are done. So they study the burial, but take nothing from it. This is because the living ancestors of these ancient people still like to honor their dead. The vast majority of archaeology undertaken is developer-led, meaning the site is only being dug because it's going to be developed for housing / industry / quarrying, etc. The site is essentially going to be trashed. There is no possibility of putting things back because the site will be built on the ground irretrievably altered by heavy machinery. Full archaeological excavation is generally seen as a last resort where preservation in situ isn't possible. The idea of excavation for excavation's sake is a bit old-fashioned these days, and most reputable archaeologists would agree that it's better to leave things in the ground as they are, rather than disturb them for no reason. There's also a methodology component to it. Regardless of the age of the remains, if I womble up with a metal detector, dig a hole and yoink out anything of value, that's grave robbing. If I fight for months for planning approval, record every detail of the site in obsessive detail, then refill any holes carefully when the funding has run out, even though there's still more to discover, that's archaeology. Plus, archaeology is not just graves. Please Google Canoic Man. Could be thousands of years depending on the relatives. Like 20 minutes. Like them while they're still warm. I hope I've at least gone cold before I'm buried. I actually had to look this up once for reasons. It's 100 years, or when the deceased has no remaining living relatives. Whichever comes first. If you're in the United States and find a grave, there is no period of time elapsed when it becomes legal to dig it up and loot the remains. Grave sites are legally protected. If it's a Native American burial, you'll be breaking federal law. You can dig up a grave if you have a reason to, but you most definitely require a permit to do so. And in order to get one, you'll likely need an archaeologist or medical examiner, depending on the age of the burial, running the show. The difference between an archaeological site and a modern site is different where you are, and depends on local state laws. In Florida, I know it used to be 75 years. But it's possible that's changed. I used to be an archaeologist. I have a degree in the field and worked in it, primarily in the southeastern USA for about 10 years. I'm an archaeologist, currently conducting postgraduate research focusing on early medieval trade in the North Atlantic, which is a fancy way of saying Viking fishermen. As others have said, it's not a matter of time as much as it is intent. Grave robbing is an unsanctioned, for-profit endeavor. Archaeology is a legally permitted, scientific examination for the purpose of understanding the past. Generally speaking, exhumation of recently interred remains for those purposes is forensic, rather than archaeological, despite similar methodology as it's usually conducted in the course of a criminal investigation. Contrary to the popular imagination, burial archaeology is probably only about 10% of the science, if that. Most of it is mundane shit like analyzing fishbone assemblages. I'm an archaeologist. It depends on where you live. In the US, most, if not all states have laws prohibiting the purposeful disturbance of burials. This includes ones that are 2 years in the ground to 10,000 years. Native American burials are further protected by federal laws. If you're an archaeologist and you come across a burial on a site, you need to notify the county coroner, the local police, your state's historic preservation office, and potentially the local Native American tribe. They will make determinations as to its approximate age, and if an investigation is needed, what happens to the remains, or if there is a possibility / need for notification of next of kin. Then you dig it up. Most of the time, it's pretty straightforward, and it is dug up. Generally speaking, as an archaeologist in the US, you don't go looking for burials to purposely dig them up, unless there is a good reason, since it triggers all sorts of laws and questions of ethics. Generally speaking, as an archaeologist in the US, you don't go looking for burials to purposely dig them up, unless there is a good reason, since it triggers all sorts of laws and questions of ethics. This is true in Europe too. The reason why we have comparatively more modern archaeological excavation of human remains is because archaeological oversight of development projects is more strict, and because urban areas have generally seen continual development for at least 1,000 years or more. I usually wait for the family to leave. Classy. I think the grave could be thousands of years old. It's still grave robbing if you're doing it to sell and for wealth, and not under strict guided scientific theory. Like there's a big problem in Africa and the Middle East and even China where dudes dig up old graves with bulldozers and just sell that shit. I'd call them grave robbers. Back in the 19th century, archaeologists were just glorified grave robbers taking Egyptian artifacts back to their European museums. It isn't time, it is intent. Grave robbing is to plunder the grave for valuables. Excavating an archaeological site is to learn. As an archaeologist, I think this is a very weird question. As a grave robber, I think this is a legit question. It's a bit of a grey area really. Most archaeology is developer led these days. The only reason the site gets excavated is because it's going to be developed for housing, industry, quarrying, etc. In these cases a site is going to be trashed, and full excavation is only done as a last resort to ensure features and finds are properly recorded, removed and stored before they are destroyed by heavy machinery. Most reputable archaeologists would recommend that things are best left in the ground and undisturbed if at all possible, regardless of age. So, on development sites, the age of the grave really doesn't matter, but speaking from experience, if it's wrapped in carpet, found in the topsoil, or has better trainers than me, as an archaeologist I'm still calling the cops. Anything else gets excavated to the highest professional standards and treated with respect. Also, if it's been done for archaeology, you need a license to handle human remains. I guess grave robbers are not bothered by such red tape until all the living relatives at the time of death are dead. But then there's the obvious problem of only children with no children, themselves with few relatives, so IDK. That kind of makes sense. Maybe long enough so that no one alive knows that the grave was a relative. Exactly, then I guess you're not potentially hurting anyone living. It's not a question of time, but rather a question of hats. You could also be a grave robber of prehistoric artifacts. Archaeology is dedicated to preserving the finds and putting them into the right historical context. Grave robbers just want money. Depends how many guns the people who have a problem with it have. I actually worked on an archaeological excavation a few years ago where we dug up 3,000-year-old Mycenaean tombs in Greece. The biggest issue we encountered was that at night and during the off-season, winter months, grave robbers would come to dig up the tombs to steal the artifacts in them. Once we discovered tombs, we actually had to hire a night guard to watch over them while we weren't there. These robbers had actually stolen most of the artifacts discovered at the site from the late 20th century to now, and although most were lost, some gold seal rings were found and recovered at a metropolitan auction when a professor recognized them. Archaeology is the art of destruction. Every time you remove a stone or move dirt, you are destroying something that someone made. Archaeologists acknowledge this and dedicate their lives to noting every detail and cataloging everything that they find. All of this is done for the pursuit of knowledge. Their work is the foundation of our understanding of the ancient world. They usually have no money and their careers ahead of them are not easy. Looters are just in it to profit off it, and they can make a lot of money every time they remove an artifact. The artifact itself disappears forever, just to end up in someone's private collection that they can't even show to their friends. And all the information vanishes with it, because without context it's just another mysterious old thing. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed watching this video. Leave your thoughts in the comments below.